Happy Saturday, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rob, and I am back with episode number 340 of Shut Up and Grind, where we're all about overcoming obstacles, defying the odds, and helping you clear whatever's blocking your path to whatever success you want in this lifetime. So, whatever platform you're joining us on, please like, subscribe, share, help us push the word out because there are many people out there who are stuck in a rut or who are going through something and they need that inspiration to help get them through it. So that's what this show is all about. I have an audience in 65 different countries. I've had guests from 6 of the 7 continents, and it's all about you, making your life easier, just one episode at a time. So today, we're going to be talking about men's rights and emotional liberation. And as you guys know, it can go off in other directions as well. These are unscripted, organic conversations. They're real, raw, and unfiltered. So buckle up because today's guest is Dr. Bernadette, and I don't want to butcher your last name. I forgot to ask you how to pronounce it, but welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Robert, for having me. Yes, you say my name is Bernadette Atanga, Dr. Bernadette Atanga.
Atanga. Okay, see, I was going to guess and say Atanga, so I'm glad I didn't because I would have said it wrong. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to come in and share your stories and your expertise with us. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yes, and to the audience, yes, I am at the stage of my life where I have to wear my glasses all the time now or else I can't see. So it's just a part of life. It is what it is. So, Dr. Bernadette, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, my goodness. There is a lot to say, but I'm going to make it very succinct. So I was born in Cameroon, Africa, and I am a global citizen, I would say. I grew up in Cameroon. It's a very diverse country, rich with over 250 ethnic groups and cultures. And by that, I mean, so difference in language, in food, in clothing. So we grew up with really a lot of diversity. If I take just food, you can go 2 weeks without repeating the same food, and none of that is your culture. So that's how we learn to embrace other cultures. And the language is a difference. You may just move 8 miles and you're in a different village and a different language. So we're surrounded with all of that. And then I went to Italy. That's where I went to boarding school. So I went there without even speaking the language, like dropped in Italy without even knowing good morning in Italian, and had to navigate my way from Rome to Perugia, where the language school was, and just, figuring it out, talking to people, asking how to buy a ticket, how to go to this place and change a train. But again, it helps you navigate the world. And then I consider Italy my other culture because it's just, I think in Italian sometimes. And then I moved to the United States, where I did, again, a double specialty in internal medicine and pediatrics, and I'm now a US citizen, and it has just enriched my world. And because of all of this travel and meeting other cultures and comparing with my own culture, learned a lot. And I would say this, actually, who I am is really a product of who my parents are, because they pushed us to travel. And I will never forget what my father said: travel a lot because you would learn what the classroom will not teach you. And I think that has also come to be true. And another thing he said was, people around the world are the same. And I have also found that to be true. I would listen to other people's stories and I would think, this is my story. Or I would listen to other things that we thought was just our culture, but it's happening here. So
let me jump in on that one. Yeah, let me jump in on that one. Because in doing this show, like I said in my intro, I've spoken to people from 6 of the 7 continents. And that's one thing that's definitely global, is the grind is global, but the struggle is also global. So like everyone, whether they're from Argentina, South Africa, Congo, Thailand, India, Australia, New Zealand, like everyone talks about that same struggle, which is why I focus this show, because it used to just be about exercise, health, and wellness. And then I expanded it because I find out that just the more people I started talking to, it's like no matter where they are, no matter what their economic status is, like there's people with 8-figure businesses that struggle with self-doubt. There are people who are poor who are struggling with self-doubt. People in the middle class who are struggling with self-doubt. So I want to ask you first, before you continue, why did you move from Cameroon to Italy?
Again, it was just normal for us. I'm the eighth of 10
Hmm.
children, and my
Okay.
father sent, and this was a time when people did not travel a lot, but all my older siblings all studied abroad. So the very first one, this was like in the 60s. My father sent them abroad. They went to, I think, another African country and eventually came to the US. My first two sisters, they studied in England. And this is like in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And then the other ones came to the US. So growing up, it was just normal. I just assumed and I knew I was going to go abroad. It was a given in my family, because again, my father believed in that education and going out and learning, because he was also very much a well-traveled person. And so
Yes.
he came back to Cameroon in the late 40s and 50s. And because he had traveled a lot, he came back with a different kind of culture. He established businesses that were not available. And it allowed him, he was a man of means, and he provided us a different kind of childhood that most people did not have. And so erroneously, we were labeled, they said that one, then a white man picking them, which means those are white children. And I share that because I've heard that here in the US, in either African American communities or other minority communities, if you behave in a way that is a little bit different from your culture, or what is considered your culture, or your lifestyle seem to be different or assimilate other cultures, you're labeled as other than. And so, but that was just because, and I can understand at the time, when you're one of few that have things, or you've traveled and you have a mindset that other people don't have, it may be difficult for them to understand. And I think the error was assuming that because we lived and grew up in the city, we spoke English at a time when it was not normal for households, the children in the household, to speak English as their first language. They assumed that we were not traditional. And now that we have grown up, people are surprised that we speak not only pidgin English, we speak the dialect, because my father understood that culture was very important. And the way people learned language, for those of us whose languages are not written, you learn through maybe going to the village, going to, living with grandparents. I came along at a time when my grandparents were dead, except for one, who, my grandmother, I was only about 2.5, 3 when she passed. So we did not have that grandmother in the house to learn the language. But they are surprised that I speak the language fluently. Even when I go back to do my projects in Cameroon and I go to the village, I speak in the dialect. And that is because even though we were considered white, my father valued culture. And so in our home, we had to speak both languages. So amongst ourselves, the children, we spoke English, but it was mandatory that we must address our parents in the dialect. So even though it was difficult, that was the only way we had to learn. You must talk to them in the dialect. And so by so doing, we learned the language. And so in our house, it's common. We have, we have traditional things like you don't call your superior by name. There is always a suffix. And in my dialect, it's called Ndia, Ndia. So all of my siblings that are above me, I call them Ndia Peter, Ndia Paul. You cannot. So those are just cultural things that people assume that because we spoke English, we had things that other people didn't have at a time when, people did not have that, but we were very cultural. And I think that is reflected now when they see, like when I was in Italy, I focus on doing African fashion parades. In Italy, by the way, this is my...
Let me pause you real quick. Yeah, let me pause you real quick, because I've heard my entire life that I'm like the whitest black guy ever. So when people were saying that you guys were growing up white, did that affect you at all? Because with me personally, I'm like, I'm a product of my parents. Like, this is how my parents raised us. It's like both of my parents are from the city, but when we moved out of New York, I mean, I was only 2.5. So like, I didn't pick up any of that city culture. I live in the woods now. I grew up in a nice neighborhood. predominantly white neighborhood, went to a really good school. Our parents taught us to be respectful. That's what it is. And it's like I got more hate from people who look like me more than I did from the white community. So like I didn't even take that as an insult, but when people say, "Oh, you're acting white," I'm like, what? When did the characteristics get assigned to a skin color? It's like, just because I have brown skin, I'm supposed to sag my pants and wear my hair a certain way and all this other stuff. I'm like, that's nonsense.
Well, you asked whether it affected me. Not really, because we had the education. I think my parents also educated us as to where that was coming from. So we knew. So if you know where that is coming from, then you don't take it personally. You just give them time, they would catch up. And I think with time, that everybody now, it's a global world. You don't even need to leave your country to know what is happening in another country with internet.
Yeah.
And so things that were seen as exclusive to us or white is now available to everybody with commerce. Things now, so everybody in the most remote place has access to things that when they didn't, and that divide, it created sentiments that people may think you are different from them. So it didn't affect me in that sense. It just made me aware that with time they would catch up. The only time where I would say that became a consideration is when I would go back to do the education programs that I'm doing, and where I wanted to involve traditional leaders. I think I had that awareness, that identity of being labeled as, my family was always labeled as, that one then a white man them, or the fact that I studied abroad, and, it would appear as if I'm bringing Western culture into their culture. So I took that into consideration, and I was more conscious as to how I approach them. I made sure I make them understand I value our culture, I respect our culture. And I think just the fact that I spoke the dialect threw people off. They were like, "Oh, so you were not really as white as we thought." Because now, mind you, this is not something that you could go to school and study. You don't study at school. So to have known, and you don't just grow up and know it, it means you've been speaking this ever since you were a child. And so then that made it change things. And the fact that I approached them, especially the traditional leaders, saying there are a lot of good things in our culture that people have forgotten. And what is happening now is not culture, it's abuse. And the fact that people have done it over and over doesn't make it culture. So let's separate what is valuable. And the fact that I could actually tell them what culture was, and even the roots of culture, because I was homeschooled in that. My parents educated us. And that is why no matter how far we go, no matter what we accomplish, our roots are in our culture, because we know it very well. We were steeped in, and it's not just my parents' parents. So I can tell you, even grandparents that I did not meet, my parents' stories connect to them and the values that connect to them. So that part of culture, I was very schooled in, homeschooled as far as the values of our culture, and I carry that with me. And I was also encouraged to embrace other cultures, what is valuable in other cultures. And I think it is that value that I bring that makes me richer than, the person I was.
All right. So how did you get into the men's rights space?
Well, I'm a physician, and so health when I grew up in Cameroon, I wanted to do medicine, but all I knew about medicine was physical medicine, right? So as a child, you have physical illness, you go to the hospital and you're treated. So I would say, up until when I went to medical school in Italy, that was my idea of what medicine was. It was not until I got introduced now to psychosomatic diseases and mental health as part of our, well-being. And as I studied psychiatry and, psychosomatic diseases through my medical school training, I would look back and I realized that we've got these problems. And now the other erroneous belief we had was that we did not have those problems. Those were Western problems. We didn't have depression. We didn't. So, and I'm talking about conversation amongst myself and my medical schoolmates from Cameroon. And then we had two things. You could actually see people who were labeled crazy, who, sleep on the, they sleep on the streets, maybe go around naked. So extremes of mental illness. And they were labeled as crazy. So that one people understood, but they didn't think we had depression. So that's how I got into that. And then when I moved to the US, which was now that again, that conflict of I was going to study and go back to Cameroon, but life took a different path and I came here. So you're living with that conflict was I'm not serving my people and I'm here. And so I thought, how can I serve them given while I am here pursuing this other goal? And I realized that mental health was something that I could take to them without actually setting shop there. And because I could see classmates, I went to boarding school. I remember a classmate that had trichotillomania, and I could connect that to other things that might have happened in their lives that brought that. So there was a lot. It was just glaring what was going on. Then we looked into family life and the things that were happening with parents and men, and alcoholism and a lot of other things that were going on. And that was why I decided to bring that there. Mind you, I thought this was a problem in Cameroon because I assumed in the West, this is something that is discussed. It's in the open, it's accepted, so everybody is taken care of. So it wasn't until I started practicing and I would encounter men, and I realized first that minority communities did not embrace mental health openly. And then I thought, okay, this is a minority community thing. And in the last 17 years, I've worked predominantly with men. And I realized even Caucasian men have that difficulty. And the difficulty was not just mental health, was family life, was emotions. And I realized what is universal among all of these men and what affects them emotionally is that internationally, men have been taught to suppress their emotions. In every culture, as a child, you are told you have to be tough. You are told boys don't cry. You are told, so you can imagine going through life and things are happening to you. And we all have emotions. So men have learned to, I hurt, but I have to shut it down. But like I say, just like anything that you put pressure in, if you don't release that pressure in a healthy way, in a slow way, it's going to explode. Okay, if you don't release the valve of a pressure cooker so that that pressure comes out in a controlled manner, if you dare open that, it's going to explode. You blow into a balloon and you keep blowing into it. If you don't release that air gradually, it's going to burst. And that's what we're seeing with men in their physical health and in their emotional health, in their relationships and in the workplace.
Well said. Yeah, so being a man myself, and I know when I was little, my siblings would argue that I cried all the time. But like as you get older, it's like, yeah, you're taught you got to be tough. You don't cry in public, and you do end up suppressing everything. And a lot of men, I mean, I know women do this too, but a lot of men end up turning to your point, to dangerous outlets, and then you get those dangerous outlets, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, and you get those lowered inhibitions, and then you don't want it to surface in that moment because people can die. When people get those inhibitions lowered and then those emotions boil over, people can end up getting hurt, getting killed, and bad things can happen. Like women can end up getting abused. So what are some of your best practices for men to have these outlets?
Well, first of all, before we go to men individually, I think we have to examine our culture as a whole.
Yes.
This is not something that men can do.
We could do a whole episode on that.
Yes. So I think, and that is why I'm bringing this conversation now. I also think it's critical, not because, I've seen that one man after another in my 30 years of practicing medicine, but one at a time is not solving the problems in our community. So I think when you look at the violence in the community, I think we need to bring this as a community conversation. The way we raise our boys, the expectations we have with them. And if you look at women who have also been raised that way, with emotional suppression, you can have the same outcome. So violence and all of that is not limited to men. Why I say it has to be a community conversation is because all communities raise men to be that way. Now, how do men what they have to do. I say we have to embrace vulnerability. For every man, I say, you are human. Forget about what society has taught you. You are human. It's normal to cry. Now, as you say, crying in public, there are spaces for everything, right? So there are times when you have to hold it in temporarily because, I need to get out of this environment and into an environment where I feel safe to be vulnerable with the people that would have compassion to you. Because another thing about vulnerability is people can abuse that. So, and I'll give you an example. You may hear men say when they're vulnerable, women don't respect them, or they use that against them, or they think they are weak. Now, on one hand, it is not the fault of the woman because women have also been raised to realize that if a man cries, it's a weak man. So when we told boys that if you cry, it means you're weak, we're also teaching women to see a vulnerable man as a weak man. And how do you respect a weak man when you want him to be a leader? So it's really a dysfunction in our collective behavior as a community.
Let me ask you a question. Yeah, let me ask you a question. Do you think that stems from like way back when men had to get out there and fight to the death to protect the community? Like, do you think that's where it stems from? Because like the men had to be poised and ready to fight, and maybe they didn't want emotions to get in the way when you got to fight to the death.
Well, I'm not an anthropologist, so I don't know if I can answer that far back. But if I just look at our communities and men that I have spoken to, it's not even though the predominance is to see that men should be strong or they don't cry. And truly, maybe there was the expectation that if you're the leader, you're supposed to be strong. And if you look at, our patriarchal society, women and children were property or things that needed to be protected, right? So, if, like you say, the man had to protect. I think with time, we're no longer in that time.
Yeah.
With time, men's roles have not changed as being the provider and the protector, right? But we have empowered women to provide for themselves, to even protect themselves, which it's not a bad thing. And I think a lot of that was also done to help women to get out of abusive situations, because if they were in abusive relationships, you cannot get out because you cannot take care of yourself, you cannot earn a living, you don't have the skills. And if you leave and leave your children behind, their fate is even worse. And that's not just in Cameroon, that's also here. So I think it's a good thing that women were empowered to become self-sufficient and to be able to take care of themselves. But what we failed to do in the process was then to re-educate men on what their role, or how, their new role. How do you still be a leader and a protector or a provider in this same union where the woman is not 100% dependent on you for her daily living? How do you still redefine your value as a man? Because what they see is the women are still, in most cases, would still respect a man, but it is the man that devalues himself because he thinks, now that I cannot pay for everything you need, you don't need me for anything materialistic, then I have no value, which is not true. So I think what we need to do is redefine what it means to be a man of value. Now, some men know that, but the other thing is, again, just like we talked about weakness when a man is vulnerable, some women also don't know how to value a man that does not match what they have or even more. So again, I think we are living in a very confused time. We've made progress as to how we advance ourselves outside of the home, but we've not re-educated ourselves how we do in the home. And that also spills over in the workplace. Because if in the workplace you see a man that comes from a background where women are not supposed to work, women are supposed to be at home, and women are supposed to listen to men, in the workplace, that man might have a difficulty with a peer who is a female. So I just think it's a collective re-education we need to do.
Okay, so what do you think the first step is?
Education is the first step. Secondly, getting men together to open that conversation, that they are emotional beings and it's okay. And I say that because when I have provided space for any man in the office and they shed a tear, they always feel better and they thank you. Oh no, first they apologize, which I think is terrible, because when you provide that space for them to let it out, because when they feel safe, they would let it out. The first thing I hear is, I'm sorry, because you saw them cry. I'm like, no, you cannot be sorry for being human. You just lost your wife. You just went through a divorce after 30 years. You just put your dog down. And that is, so those things that are emotional, we have to get people to the space or give them space where they can express that without feeling like they did something wrong and without them having to apologize. And in that moment, I give them space. You take as much time as you need, let it out, and validate the fact that this is normal and what you're going through is normal, and give them a roadmap of what's going to happen. You're going to have a roller coaster of emotions. Or somebody who just lost a child. You get somebody who is 70 years old and their only son, 50 years old, died. And this is the person. So you had planned the rest of your life knowing that you're going to have this. How do we expect that person to go on? So educate, give them space, get men to, because men support each other more. If they can share this together more, that is good. And that's why you see I'm doing more speaking engagements on this. I actually we talked about the book that Beneath the Armor,
Oh
which
yeah.
is, yes, so that's this was actually for men, Beneath the Armor, eight practical strategies for men to embrace vulnerability and lead with authentic strength. And so that title is intentional. So embracing vulnerability so that they can lead with authentic strength, because I still want them to be the leaders that they are meant to be, whether it's leaders in the boardroom or leaders in the family room. And I think there is also the disconnect. A lot of men feel as they are great leaders in the boardroom, but they feel useless in the family room. And so they don't even return home. And then from work, they go to places that ends up creating more problems for them in their private life. So I talk about
Yeah.
that too. Now, why men, women, we've had our sisterhood for a long time, right? A woman can meet another woman at the bus stop or at the airport, total strangers, but within 30 minutes, they're going to connect. They'll talk about their struggles. That's therapy. They share with each other. Men don't do that. And I think we need to encourage men to form that brotherhood. They have brotherhoods and fraternities, but I think with time, if we can open that conversation for them, it will be helpful.
Yeah, so this is my sister here. She says I do agree with them not being able to deal with their emotions. And again, and that goes back to upbringing, starting there, what you're told when you're young. But one thing that I do personally is I've freed myself from the societal norms. I'm me. I am who I am. And if I'm giving a speech and if it brings me to tears, it brings me to tears. If people want to make fun of me, whatever, that's a you problem. Right? And I've gotten myself to the point where I call myself emotionally bulletproof. So I don't let anything outside sway me from anything that I want to do. And if somebody doesn't like it, yeah, Rob 20 years ago was trying to just please everybody. And now I realize you can't please everybody. I'm gonna get up here. I'm gonna do what I do. The ones that get it from my perspective, because I believe there's not one way to fix everything. There's multiple ways that you can get to your destination. So people that like my style, they like the guests that I bring on, they'll gravitate to this show. The ones that don't, there's thousands of podcasts out there. So you use the word a couple times, vulnerability. And I've done several episodes on vulnerability. And I'm telling you, you get on stage in a crowd of 1,000 people, and as a man, you can shed a tear. Nobody in that room is going to judge you. And I know that because I've done it, right? Nobody in that room is going to judge you. They're going to be silent. They're going to clap. They're going to come afterwards and tell you how your story touched them. That's why it says above us, your true power lies in your story. Again, if I talk about my father passing away from the time he got sick to the time he took his last breath, I can't get through that whole story without welling up at some point in the story. If I tell a quick blurb, I can, but if I tell the whole story, there's no way I can get through it. But that's a part of life. Men have tear ducts for a reason, right? So somewhere down the line, society said you're not supposed to cry, and we just ran with it. So I don't deal. I cried yesterday when I had my one-on-one with Kim Walsh Phillips. I got emotional telling my story with her. It's a part of life. There's nothing wrong with it.
And like, I like what you just said, that men have tear ducts, which is true. They are meant to be used. And I do think they may not cry using the tear ducts, but they cry in other ways. Substance abuse is a way of crying. Promiscuity, alcoholism, and add any other isms that you can find. Domestic violence. Yes. And as I will tell you, I was thinking about this when I was getting ready to come on this podcast, and I think I mentioned that in my book, where even when the men are doing these things, it's not as if they enjoy it. They know it's not right, but they feel helpless. They don't know how to do otherwise, right? The emotion that they feel, they are not allowed to express that authentic emotion. The coping strategies, it's just whatever happens and whatever gives you comfort and excitement in the moment. And then it becomes an addiction. Gambling is another one. And especially this is really important, because when we hear this, we think about the drug addict in the alley. We're talking about professional men. And a lot of the work that I did in overseas, it's really with white collar, clean cut professional men that are going through this. And why is this critical? If we look at the statistics, suicide rate in men is high.
Yeah, it's like 70%, right?
Yeah, I don't know the exact statistics now, but it's always been higher than women. So these are the people who are our leaders. But if we just think about it, they go through life and things are happening. We tell them you cannot express it, and we see the violence. So I think if there is any time to discuss that, I think this is an epidemic, and I think this is a public health issue. The other thing is, when men are vulnerable and lead from a place of authentic strength, we all benefit. We benefit at home, and we benefit in the workplace. We benefit as a community. So I think it is time for us for the mask to come off and, look beneath the armor. There are times you have to wear your armor, right? I talked to one person who, like a football player, you have to wear your armor. That is protective gear there so that you are not injured. There are times you need that armor if it is to protect you, but then you have to take it off and then you deal with what is underneath. And we have different types of armor. It can be, it can be power, just somebody who exerts power, whether it's power at the workplace and how they exert it, and with control. It could be money, somebody who has money and they think that covers everything. It could be women, you have the person who their power lies in the fact that they can have any woman anytime, but it doesn't give them that satisfaction and peace that they are craving. And because you meet a lot of people, they would tell you, I have all of this thing, but I'm not satisfied. And worse is when it affects their health. So they have the high blood pressure, they have, diabetes that is uncontrolled, because emotionally, it takes work to be disciplined to take care of your physical health. And they don't do that, or they're not able to do that. Another person, and you as a fitness trainer, you might have seen that. Another person is using physical fitness as their armor, right?
Yeah, so even all the time.
So even the things that are supposed to be healthy or good for you, we also use them as armor unhealthily. So it's just about training people to bring the conversation and make it normal, and making people realize that embracing vulnerability takes you to the path of leadership and leading with authentic strength.
Yeah, my sister says, I tell them women live longer because we cry.
That's probably true, because we put out the stress. Because when you handle that stress, and without going too technical in medicine, stress, you release cortisol in your body. And that is and that constant secretion of cortisol it's associated with a lot of illnesses. So yeah, it may be true because we cry. And that's why I say people need therapy. And even when women don't go to therapy, they do therapy amongst each other. We talk with each, just the fact that you can talk to somebody about how you feel, even when that person does not provide an answer, just listening to you is helpful because they give you space to release and relieve the tension within.
See, that's the key there. Like, so you have the medical background. I do not. I've just been a 50-year observer of life, right? And just interacting with thousands upon thousands of people in my lifetime, you start to notice trends, you start to notice patterns. And one thing one thing I've noticed in my travels is that everything that can cause division is a cost center for someone. White versus black, money. Men versus women, money. Religion versus atheists, cash cow. And we have to realize that, like with social media and all that, a lot of this stuff is manufactured. It's like we've gotten to the point where men don't think they need women and women don't think they need men, when in reality, it's a partnership. Like, this is what you bring to. It's like if you're building a house, you need the electrician, you need the plumber, you need the carpenters. It's like you need all of these different facets of things for everything to gel. Like, men and women would just get back to working together instead of fighting each other and fighting for power and fighting for dominance. I think a lot of that is what's causing this. Like, if the man takes the lead role, then the woman's feeling slighted. It's like, no, there's times where the woman needs to take the lead role. There's times when the man should take the lead role. There's times you should do things together. And it just gotten to the point to where that's not the case anymore. Like, I saw it growing up with my parents. There were things that were definitely dad's department. There were things that were definitely mom's department. And then there were things they worked on together. Now that dynamic is gone. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think this is not new. It's just that it's magnified now because, like you say, we have means and we have social media. But as long as there have been families, these are not new problems. And I think again, it's a misunderstanding of what power is and who should have the power and when should they exert power. Like you say, it's a partnership, but I don't think people understand that. So depending on what your own upbringing is, to some people, it is the man has the power, the woman has to do what the man says, and the woman has to take care of the man. Now, this is not just a predominantly male idea. So you have women that are raised in that kind of household. They also think that is the way it should be. So even if a man beats you up, the question is, but what did you do? You didn't make his breakfast right. You didn't. So you would even have women that would penalize other women for standing up against abuse. Are they wrong? And just like yesterday, I was watching something on, from Cameroon, and there was a woman actually giving advice to other women that I thought, whoa. But again, and she said, my father taught me that. And I'm thinking, okay, she believes that because her father taught her that, which was just really terrible advice. And I'm thinking of the household that I grew up. So the fact that people practice or do certain things over and over doesn't make it right, doesn't make it culture. It is just, we have to look at why they are doing it. Because if your father is emotionally unstable and is doing certain things out of their own unhealthy emotions, that does not make it right for the next generation to continue. And I talk about men, you have to educate yourself and break the cycle of whatever dysfunction that is. I come from a household where, as I say, it's not new. I lost my parents just a few years ago. My mom was 96 years old when she passed. My dad was officially 100, but he was actually 104 when he passed. No. So, yeah. But, so you can imagine, and this is in Cameroon, Africa. So you can imagine my parents came from a time when polygamy was the norm. Having many wives was a display of wealth and power. Now, which was not true. My parents came at the time of transition, when people were transitioning from the agrarian economy to now we have this Western economy, commodities, right? In the agrarian economy, it made sense. Women were property, and children. So having more women and more children made you wealthy because you had the workforce in your own home. You didn't have to pay for labor. So it made sense that more women, more children was wealth. But with that transition, when children and women became liability, meaning you had to send them to school, you had to pay for tuition, you had to buy things for your wives, people like my father understood that. Now, he chose not to go the polygamy route because it didn't make sense for him. But there were people who actually laughed at him and mocked him because they thought he was being controlled by one woman. Okay. But as time went on, they realized he's able to send his children to school and pay for tuition because he planned for them. On this other side, you have many children. You cannot send them to school. You marry them off early to other men that they have another fate of abuse. So again, when you say, was it, you have to look at why did people do things? When I go back and I talk to our traditional leaders, we have to look at the why. It made sense at a certain time. It doesn't make sense now. So yes, if people want to be wealthy, if you want to be wealthy and your wealth comes from the terrain, how many acres of land you have, and the people that are going to work and the produce that is going to come from there, yes, many wives, many children is wealth. When now you've moved to, you have an office job with the government or whoever is employing you, you live in the city, you're renting a house that you can only pay from your income, and you have two wives that have to stay with you on rental property, and you have so many children that you have to pay tuition for, you're always going to be a poor man. And so it took time for people to catch up on that. But those initial people, they just did what they thought they had to do. And they were even encouraged to take more wives because they thought that was culture. But that was because people do things without thinking why. Another example I give, and I go back to our own community, is we have this struggle with age where, lots of families are big and decisions have to be made. And and this spills even in our administration, where the older person doesn't like to be challenged, or if their idea is not a good idea, they are dismissive of people who are younger because you're supposed to respect the older person, or the older person says this. I believe in respect and we respect each other. But the thing they don't realize, which I brought to the table, was in our olden days, there was a reason why the older person made the decision, because there was an education system, and it was education by age. So you had to arrive a certain age before certain things were taught to you. And so wisdom came with age. And today it still applies. Nothing trumps life experience. So wisdom comes with age. So up to that point, we are fine. Now, fast forward now, where we brought in these different kinds of education, formal education, and people specialize in all different fields, right? And so you have a situation, and this is the example I used for one of my radio programs in Cameroon. So you have a situation where you have an elder person in the family. He's male. He's the successor, because we have the structure of kind of royalty in families. So you always have a successor. So you have the successor. He's the older one. And you have the junior sister who now had formal education and is now a nurse and works in the capital city. So their father or grandfather is ill. And in that time, decision was they would take this person to the traditional practitioner. But you have the junior sister who is a nurse, recognizes that grandpa is having a stroke and wants them to go to where they know they can have better treatment. So that creates conflict, because the older person thinks, I am older, I am the decision maker. You are young, I help pay for your school. You're being disrespectful by not listening to me. And I give that example to say, yes, you may be older, and true, what had been passed down to us was the older person made the decision, but it was not because they were older, it was because they were more knowledgeable in a system of education where knowledge came with age, and it was very linear. So now what the lesson we have to take from there is that it was the person that has the knowledge that makes the decision, not the person that is older.
Okay.
So that is the kind of education for people to be able to diffuse some of the conflict that we face, right? I have no idea about engineering or architecture. If I want to build a house today and I have a sibling who is an engineer or an architect, even if they are 20 years younger than me, I have no input about how that house is going to be constructed. Now, if you want to talk about medicine, I can say something because that's where my expertise is. So what I take back to our people is decision making. Yeah, we inherited age, but it was not, if you look at it, the why was because the older person in that system of education was the more knowledgeable person. And so how we apply that today to reduce some of the conflicts that we have is when we sit, well, the age, we still have to respect our elders. That is true every time, anywhere. But when it comes to decision making, it is who has the knowledge. And that comes also into couples relationships. Because again, it's the same thing. If the man is supposed to be the leader of the family, one of the things I say is leadership doesn't mean you have all the answers. It means you have the courage to embrace vulnerability, to know what you don't know, and to tap into the knowledge of the people who have it. So if it is your wife who has the knowledge, then that's what we're going to use in that moment. It doesn't take away from you as a man. That's why you guys are partners, right?
Exactly.
But we have been messed up, both men and women, to the point where if a man is willing to take that information or give a woman space, if it is a woman that has not been raised to respect a man, even when you're giving them information, then they start thinking you're weak or you're useless. So I think we need to educate each other. And on the flip side, if you see a woman that values a man that doesn't have as much and can see true value, the man might start thinking you, the woman, you are not as valuable as I thought. If you value somebody like me, that does not bring the traditional things on the table.
Well said. Well said. All right. So we got a few minutes left here. So let people know where they can get your book, how they can connect with you, and then I'll ask you for a final word.
Oh, the book is available now. You can get it on Amazon, both ebook and hard copy. You can get that on Amazon. You can also connect with me through my website, which is www.atanga, as my name is spelled, MD, so ATANGA MD.com, www.atangamd.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook. And we're building a community around Beneath the Armor. So look forward for, I think it's going to be a Facebook community where it's a space where I want men to share, because the other thing is for men to share how they shed the armor, how they look beneath the armor. And just since the book has come out, talking to men, I hear a lot of men say, oh no, I was taught to cry. I was raised to express emotions. And those people, they make good relationships, they make good leaders. And they also, one of the things that they share is like one lady just told me yesterday, this is a book that I needed for my son, my 25-year-old son. So it really humbles me. And I also really appreciate the fact that it is doing what I had hoped for it to do, which is to really give people that space to feel normal and to feel whole again and to lead with authentic strength.
Right. So was that your final word, or do you want to give another final word?
Well, again, it is, let's do this together. Let's do this as a community. And you can go on my website, you can send me messages. So you go to the contact page, you can send a message. And if there is more stuff that you want me to do, if you want me to come to your community for speaking engagements, I'm available for that. You can send me a message to that. And then we're doing men's conferences. Like I said, I have a men's conference coming up in May. That's Mental Health Awareness Month. And we also have June, which is Men's Health Awareness Month. So if you want me to come to your community, to come, I do workshops at businesses and things like that. So it's my mission and my passion, and I'm available to serve.
Well stated. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I believe I put all of your links in the description anyway, so they are all right there, readily available. And if you want to come back, I do panels every now and then. If you like, I take where is it? Like I take up to 6 of my former guests. I know this one shows 4, but I take up to 6 of my former guests, and we pick one topic, and we all dissect the one topic. And that's to show, like I mentioned earlier, there's isn't just one way to get to the goal. So we bring on, like, I'll take the 6 guests first, and then I'll give the topic, just so I can make sure that everyone can speak on that topic, because I've interviewed you all, so I know everyone's story. And the panels go very, very well, and a lot of collaborations have come from those panels too. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll add you to my email list.
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. Anything that can help the community, I'm all for it.
All right. Awesome. Well, you enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care. Get that awkward